Just a second. Yeah. Yes. So to our speakers now. As I said, Eli Eshed and Rabbi Jeremy Borovitz we have the pleasure to talk to you, with you, and to learn from you. And very brief introduction of this person's and their background. I'm just looking for the notes because I prepared my my table for different parts of the session, and to be accurate about the biographies and not to miss anything. Yes, Eli Eshed is a well-known Israeli journalist, blogger, lecturer, researcher of popular culture. He's also an educator of the online magazine Yekum. The most interesting thing today is that Eli Eshed is a descendant of Gaon of Vilna, and researchers and published already a lot of articles on Gaon's influence on popular culture and arts, very non-conventional.
Yes.
Welcome, Eli. Rabbi Jeremy Borovitz, a dear friend of mine as well, was raised in New Jersey, and he is a son of a Reform rabbi and lawyer of the Jewish Theological Seminary. He got his BA in public policy from the University of Michigan in 2009 and joined the Peace Corps. Jeremy served in Ukraine as a volunteer. That's why Jeremy speaks terrific Ukrainian and Russian. Worked for Moshe House and as a European Director of Jewish Education in different cities across Europe. And now Jeremy Borovitz and his dear wife and daughter live in Berlin. And Jeremy is the Director of Jewish Learning of Base Berlin. Welcome, Jeremy. And now Jeremy will introduce us to this week's learning, and those who joined already previous workshops with Jeremy in connection with Empowering Jewish Voices, a learning track, know his Torah already, and this will be a very beautiful extension of that. And thank you for bringing us a piece of Torah today.
Amazing. Thank you, Nastia. Thank you, Ella. And thank you, Eli. I'm really excited to be here. And I'm just going to say, I'm not going to talk so much about the Gaon of Vilna's life, because Eli, I think, is going to touch more about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Gaon of Vilna's Torah and his approach to Torah. And what I should say, the Gaon of Vilna, he's writing in the 18th century. And the Gaon of Vilna had a couple of unique approaches to his commentary on Jewish texts. And he wrote a lot. I will say the Gaon of Vilna, he has a commentary on the Torah. He has a commentary on the Mishnah that he was constantly adding to the extent that there were like sentences that were unfinished at the time of his death. And he also had a commentary on the Talmud and on Halakha. He also allegedly had he has a math commentary. He wrote a math book, which allegedly he wrote while he was on the toilet, because the toilet was the one place where he couldn't study Torah. So instead of studying Torah on the toilet, he studied math. That story is almost certainly not historically accurate, but I think gives a good sense of who the Gaon of Vilna was. I'll also say the Gaon of Vilna, he didn't believe that in being too wordy, in speaking too much. He very much felt like the Torah, there's the Torah shebichtav and the Torah shebe'al peh, the written Torah and the oral Torah. Now, traditionally, this is seen to mean you have the written Torah, the Bible, the Tanakh, and then you have the oral Torah, the Mishnah, the Talmud, all the commentaries. And he very much felt, okay, I'm in this oral Torah tradition. I don't need to be saying too much. You shouldn't be writing down too much of what I'm saying. I'll just talk a little bit and you'll hear it. And he also famously, he had a small select group of students, but he didn't have, he wasn't giving these grand lectures. So today we're gonna look actually at a commentary of the Gaon of Vilna. It's called Biurei Hagra, or the elaborations of the Gra, the elaborations of the Vilna Gaon. So I'll ask Nastia to share the screen with the sheet. And we're going to look, actually, I was going to find something on this week's Parsha, but then I found something better. Because actually, he doesn't have anything on this week's Parsha, so that made it a little bit easier. This, by the way, is coming from an amazing site, Sefaria. If you don't know Sefaria, learn about Sefaria. And for all the German speakers in the audience, there is a huge treasure trove of German translations of different Jewish texts that is going to be appearing on Sefaria in the next 6 to 8 months. So that's really, really exciting. Cool. So we're actually going to look at something in Halacha. We're in an interesting time in the Jewish calendar right now. It's called the 3 weeks. And it's actually between the 17th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av. And it's kind of a time of mourning on the Jewish calendar. Some people have this tradition not to get haircuts, not to buy new things, different things like that. And it's all connected back to the destruction, the breaching of the city walls in the destruction of the Second Temple, and as well as the destruction of the Second Temple itself, and also the First Temple. So it's commemorating events that happened somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 years ago. And that's actually totally not important, except for that's how I got to where we were today. Because I was looking in the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch is this grand halachic codex written in the 16th century by Rabbi Yosef Karo. I was looking in the Shulchan Aruch because I had a question. And then I was like, oh, I wonder what, because I'm teaching this class on the Vilna Gaon, and I had something else prepared. But I was teaching this class on the Vilna Gaon, and I was like, I wonder what he has to say. And what he had to say blew my mind. So we're going to look briefly at the Shulchan Aruch, and then we're going to go back in time to the Talmud, and then we're going to see how the Vilna Gaon is connecting the Talmud to Talmudic theory, to Jewish law, to everything in the Torah in like 2.5 sentences. Okay, so the Shulchan Aruch says we are required to fast on the 9th of Av, and on the 17th of Tammuz, and on the 3rd of Tishrei, and on the 10th of Tevet, because of the bad occurrences that occurred on those days. Okay, easy enough. These are 4 of the 5 minor fast days. The only other minor fast day that would be added in is the Ta'anit of Esther, the fast of Esther that happens the day before Purim. But all of this is standard stuff, nothing going on too crazy there. So I'm going to take us back in time now. And we're going to go back actually to a debate that is happening in the times of the Mishnah. And it's a debate between Rabbi Shimon, or Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is the teacher of Shimon Bar Yochai. He's actually maybe the guy who made him a rabbi. A little unclear, but according to one of the stories, he's the guy who made him a rabbi. So if Nasti can scroll down a little bit, we're going to look at this Breita, this Mishnaic era text that appears in the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, in the Talmud. So this text is probably being written around 170 CE, give or take, more or less, something like that. So the sages are disagreeing about something with regards to the fast. So Rabbi Shimon says, Rabbi Akiva would expound 4 verses, but I would not expound the text as he did. So this is already a beautiful thing. Rabbi Shimon is coming along and saying, Rabbi Akiva had this way of interpreting certain verses in the Bible. I have a different thing. So I'm going to tell you what my teacher says, and then I'm going to tell you what I say. So if you can scroll down. The fast of the 10th. Rabbi Akiva, this is Rabbi Akiva getting quoted here, the fast of the 10th, this is the 10th of Tevet, on which the king of Babylonia laid siege to Jerusalem, as it is stated, and in the 9th year, in the 10th month, on the 10th day of the month, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, write the name of the day of this same day. The king of Babylonia has laid siege to Jerusalem on this very day. Okay, why is the 10th of Tevet a fast day? Because this is the day that the king of Babylonia laid siege to Jerusalem in 586 BCE. Okay, this is why. So we fast. And why did he call it the fast of the 10th? Because it is in Tevet, which is the 10th of the months. So it's the 10th month. If you start counting from Nisan, which is where the holiday calendars start counting, he's saying it's the 10th month. That this is why it's called the fast of the 10th. Okay, let's go on to the next one, the next text, because Rabbi Shimon is going to disagree. He's going to actually disagree on a fundamental element of this whole idea. He's going to say, I do not say this, but I rather expound the verse as follows. The fast of the 10th, this is the 5th of Tevet, on which the report reached the diaspora that the city had been smitten, as it is stated, it came to pass in the 12th year of our exile, in the 10th month, on the 5th day of the month, that one had escaped out of Jerusalem came to me, saying, the city is smitten. And they made the day of the report of the destruction like the day of the actual burning, and decreed a fast on that day. Okay, so there's disagreement. Is the fast day the 10th of Tevet, or is the fast day the 5th of Tevet? Now I will say, Rabbi Akiva says it's the 10th, and Rabbi Shimon says it's the 5th. Now I will say, spoiler alert, and we know this spoiler already. The Shulchan Aruch already told us it's on the 10th. Okay, so we know this. The Shulchan Aruch, it gets decided at some point between the Mishnah, or actually the Gemara, in 550, 600 CE, where this argument is then recorded, although it's an earlier argument from the 2nd century. By the time of the Shulchan Aruch in the 16th century, this argument is recorded. And now we get to the Gra. The Gra has a beautiful, succinct commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, and he only says something when he feels like he has to say something. And he only says 3 sentences here, and each of the 3 sentences completely blows my mind. The first sentence is, and the Ramban in his work, The Torah of Man, says that the halacha and minhag is like Rabbi Akiva. And actually what he's doing there is something very, very clever and very, very important. He's saying the Shulchan Aruch, he got this opinion from the Ramban. The Gra is known to be a little bit of a critic of the Shulchan Aruch. He sometimes isn't exactly the most laudatory of the Shulchan Aruch's work. So he's saying, like, listen, the reason the Shulchan Aruch decided with Rabbi Akiva and not with Rabbi Shimon is because the Ramban did. But then he goes even deeper. And I want to say that the halacha is like him. The halacha is like Rabbi Akiva because there is no halacha which follows the student in the place of the teacher. He states a principle of Jewish law and says the Ramban decided this, and the Shulchan Aruch went along with him. Why? Because we never go with the halacha of the student in the place of the teacher. But, except from Abaye and Rava, hilchata kibatrai. The halacha is like the later thinker. At some point in the 4th generation of the Babylonia Amoraim, in about 350 CE, this idea switches. It used to be that the teacher always beat the student in a halachic disagreement. And then in 350 CE, it switches. Suddenly, the student will always defeat the teacher. Suddenly, being the later thinker gives you more power. And what's amazing about this is he's doing like 7 different things like in just 3 sentences. He's showing that you can be shortened to the point. He's showing like, okay, the Shulchan Aruch needs to be bumped up a little bit. And he's also giving deep Talmudic principles as to how halacha should be decided. Now, these aren't principles he made up. These are principles he's weeding out from lots of other thinkers throughout the centuries, certainly from the Gaonim, who were living in Babylonia almost 1,000 years before. And he shows there are deep principles at work here. And this, I think, is one of the brilliance of the Gra's Torah, is that the Vilna Gaon is not writing this for the common person. He's not writing for the common person. Because if you read this in the Aramaic, I'll even say my translation is generous. Even if you just read my translation, it's a little confusing. But my translation is very generous. The actual Hebrew Aramaic that he's writing in is incredibly opaque. It is not clear at all. He is writing for an educated audience. He is not writing his Torah for the masses. But if you can get underneath the layers of the Torah that he's teaching, it can take you to incredible places that can help you learn Torah in so many different ways in all different directions. So this is just a taste of the Vilna Gaon's Torah, of his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. And with that, I pass it back to Nastia.
Thank you very much. I'm stopping. Yeah, now. Yeah. So thank you very much, Jeremy. And if there are questions so far, I think you can ask them right away. Otherwise, we will have time to answer all your questions and refer to your commentaries in the end of the session. Yeah. Max.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. Based on what you said now, I'm wondering what is the source of this change? How can they just decide now it goes the other head? And if you take this this idea that the teacher is always right or is always superior in his opinion towards his students, even though he might be wrong and the student might be right, it still goes with the teacher.
So you're asking a great question that has there's a lot of layers to the question. So I'm going to try to answer it as succinctly as possible so that we don't spend the next hour and a half thinking about it. But there are two things happening here. One is sometimes the Talmud paskins on itself, meaning sometimes the Talmud decides for itself who's right, and sometimes it doesn't. So one of the things that is happening is up until Abaye and Rava, the Talmud is almost always siding on the side of the teacher. Okay, the Talmud itself is almost always deciding on the side of the teacher, and in Abaye and Rava's generation, that starts to shift. And then later thinkers, specifically in the Saboraim and then Gaonim of Bavel, you start to see an even bigger shift. And then there's a rabbi named Yitzchak Alfazi, known as the Rith, who wrote he did something to the Talmud, which I think is terrible. He took out all the stories and just left the legal stuff. To me, that's like, he took out all the good stuff. But that is what he did. Bakavod to the Rif. Please don't come after me when I join you in the world to come one day. But the Rif started laying down more of these principles of who was right in certain situations, and eventually these sort of principles will arise. I'll also say these principles exist, and sometimes we break the principles. Sometimes when we need to, that's not really what's happening. He's really quoting an earlier thinker. He's really quoting a later thinker. So we do find ways around it, but it's something that develops over time. Certain, like most succinctly, somewhere between the 9th to the 12th century. I'm not a scholar, so I don't want to say that for sure, but it's something that develops. These halachic principles develop over time.
Thank you, Jeremy. Are there other questions? Please raise your hand. If no, then I will be happy to continue and change to our next part and give the stage to Ellie. So the stage is yours.
You hear me? Do you hear me? It's okay, yes?
Ellie, I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, then nice to meet you. I will talk about the way the Gaon becomes so famous that if we were to this year, as you all know, there was supposed to be celebrations and events about him. That's not ordinary thing for a person, any person who had born 300 years ago. Certainly not a Jewish sag. It was true for the Gaon. It did not happen because of, as you know, the corona, but we are still trying. So why him? Why him become still so important, so famous after 300 years since he was born? There are very few other such Jewish persons. How it happened? Because, as you probably know, when he had lived at Lithuania at the 18th century, he was not that well known even among the Jews. The Lithuanians didn't, most of them never heard about him. I think that today many more Lithuanians hear about the Gaon than in his own lifetime. So I think that even more Jews today know about him than in the 18th century. So how did that happen? Well, of course, such things do not happen by itself. There were people after the Gaon had died which had published his writings and made him more famous than he was when he was living. Most of them were, as you know, rabbis which had published his scholarly writings, which not everybody, probably most everybody cannot read and understand. But still, it had become, because of those scholarly writings, very famous among the rabbis of the world. But the ordinary Jews, how did they know about the Gaon of Vilna? Well, there were stories. There become published about him stories, about many things which he had done, about the Golem. There was such a story which he had created, which was actually based about actual thing which he had told, that when he was a boy, he had tried to create a golem. There are made from that many stories. There were other things. He had some influence on literature, not much. Fine literature, I mean, fiction. A writer called Zalman Shneur. He was a great-grandson of that Zalman Shneur of Chabad, which the Gaon did not particularly like. They never met, but there was a bad history between them, and we will not speak about it. But that great-grandson of the Zalman Shneur and Ladig wrote a book in Yiddish first, then in Hebrew, about the Gaon and that great-grandfather of his. And of course, the Gaon did not appear there particularly well. If you are connected to the family of the Gaon and read that book, well, you do not like it particularly, but it is a good book. If you are read objective, this is a good book, which maybe make it much worse, but again, it's a good book. But there are not many other books of literature about the Gaon. So again, how he became that famous among the regular Jews? Well, it is quite surprising. Probably the Gaon himself would not have liked to know about that. It is because of pictures. As you know, there are many, many pictures of the Gaon over the years, since probably in the year 1890, since the beginning of the 19th century. At one point, they were so much popular that they were in almost Jewish house in Vilna, in Lithuania, in other places. They were very popular. They were sold in many hundreds of thousands, maybe in millions of copies, who knows? But everybody knows the picture of the Gaon. There were many of them. Everybody had them. Those pictures had make the Gaon literally a household item. Everybody had the Gaon, his picture in his house, to watch him, to look at him. There were not many other such Jewish people. There was Moshe Montefiore. He was also in almost every house in Vilna, in Lithuania, but not any others. The Hasidist rabbis, as you know, did not want that they will have pictures of them till the end of the 19th century. Today, it's completely different matter. Of course, today there are many pictures of all Jewish rabbis. It's okay, but in the 19th century, it was a different matter. Now, it's a question, is the pictures of the Gaon, which we know today, there are different pictures, actually his actual face? That's a good question. We don't actually know. but it probably was his face, because the first pictures appeared not that many years after his death, some 25 years after his death, when there were still many people who remembered exactly how the Gaon had looked, how he was in real life. We can be certain that if the pictures did not look like him, somebody would have screaming, somebody from his family, somebody would have taken the sellers of those pictures to court. So they probably were quite similar to the actual Gaon. So he became famous not only because of his writings, but also because of his pictures, because the way he looked like. Well, that's a way. That's one way to remember a person. And now, how influenced culture after his death? It influenced in the way that the Lithuanian people, the Lithuanian Jews, began to study more and more and more than in the past because of the example of the Gaon. They began to study the yeshiva the way the Gaon had studied. And now I would like to move to another subject. That's the subject of how the Gaon had seen the future, the events that will come. Because today, the researchers of the Gaon say that he has a very clear picture how the future should be. Absolutely clear picture, a whole plan how it should be. What was this plan? Now, these things which I speak about is a great there is a great argument about it among the researchers in Israel. There are the researchers who say it's not true, the Gaon was not that certain about the future. And there are other researchers who say we can show you, we can prove from his writing that he has a plan from the writings of his pupils and what had they actually done. So what was this plan? And actually, when I'm speaking, I'm based it on this book, which was published in Israel several years ago. I hope that you can see me again, you can see it again, good. According to this study, the Gaon spoken at a futuristic plan, which should have been of several stages. The first stage is that everything should be done by human efforts without much the influence of the sky, of God. Everything should be done by us, the humans, in completely regular human ways. The Jews should return to the land of Israel. That's the first step. Then, in what he had called the sixth millennium since creation, there will appear the person which he had called Mashiach ben Yosef, which will be a great leader. He will be the leader of the Jews. He will destroy their enemies. He will free Jerusalem. Also, this Mashiach ben Yosef will discover all the secrets, not all, but some secrets of the Bible and the ancient writing. He will be a great leader. Mashiach ben Yosef. The Gaon say that in every generation there is somebody who can be a Mashiach ben Yosef, and it will be in that generation. It will be in the sixth millennium, at the beginning of the sixth millennium. And what after that? After the Mashiach ben Yosef is helping the Jews to have a state of their own, after that there will be again a time of troubles. Again, the Jews will be, because they were rich and successful, they will not be that good Jews. They will become much worse people. So again, they will have trouble, and then it will be the time for the second Mashiach, Mashiach ben David. Mashiach ben David will be a person which will not completely natural person. He will have help from God. There will be some miracles, not many. He will again create the future kingdom of Israel. In his time, there will be built, after Jerusalem is free for a generation, the temple, the third temple. And the Gaon said that the third temple will be built completely by miracle. It will simply be there. Humans will not build it, it will be built by miracle. Hopefully so. And what will be at the time of the Mashiach ben David? Again, the prophets. Again, there will be again prophecy, something that was not for thousands of years. It will be something like what we are calling today utopia. Now, is this the end as it is in the future? Well, not. Actually not. The Mashiach ben David, he said, will be at the end of the 6th millennium, at the beginning of the 7th millennium, but there will be times after that, even after the Mashiach ben David, till the 10th millennium. So what is going the times after probably Mashiach ben David, what is going to happen? There are very few talks about it in the Gaon, even his pupils don't talk about it much, but what we can understand is that eventually humans, all humans should be like the first Adam before the fall, before he is leaving Eden. And eventually at the end, they should be better than Adam before he had left Eden. That's they fulfilling their purpose. They could make miracles. If you want, they can create golems. They will be Superman, something like that. That is the end of the future as the Gaon is seeing it. Now, when I'm reading all those study of the Gaon, I think that it's very much similar to a work of literature which I know, maybe some of them know as well. This is a work called The Foundation, a science fiction series by Yitzhak Asimov, American science fiction writer, who by some strangely is a great grandson of pupils of the pupils of the Gaon. And from what he's telling us in his writings, his family was connected to the pupils of the Gaon, knows about them, and they'll tell us if they know much about him. I think that the Asimov, in that famous work of his, had taken idea from all this, simply as a base for fiction, nothing more than that, but there is similarity, a strange similarity. By the way, I'm now hearing that there is a TV series about based on this work of Asimov. It will be next year. It will be very interesting to watch it and to think that maybe the Gaon was connected to that. Well, if there are any questions, something. If you have any, yes.
Yes, thank you very much, Eddie. My question again is the source he relies on. So the idea that there's a time after the Mashiach ben David. Is it a common sense among the rabbis, or is it just a vision only
No,
of?
I don't think that it's common.
It's common.
Even in the Gaon, even pupils of the Gaon say, there are pupils of the Gaon who say that in the 7th millennium it will be the end. There is no need, will not to continue beyond that. The Gaon is saying, like the Ramchal, by the way, which was before him, we will continue to the 10th millennium. Even the 7th millennium, even Mashiach ben David is not the end. Not at all. There is beyond that. But there is not much about him. I'm sorry, I cannot say much. There's probably much in not in writing. It's probably much more by speaking and the teaching, but I think by writing, he did not wrote much about it, unfortunately.
Joel, I saw you unmuted yourself. Do you have a question you want to?
Yeah, I do. First of all, thank you for talking. It's really interesting. My question is concerning the legacy of the Vilna Gaon. You already mentioned his prediction that the Jews would move back to the state of Israel, and Some of them already did the Parashim, and I think their
Yes.
influence is still visible. But on the other hand, him being so critical of the Hasidic movement, it's not like they could be called as followers the way the Satmars, Lubavitch could be
They are
called followers.
Hasidim, by the way. The Satmar are Hasidis. They are not the followers of the Gaon. They are other groups.
Yeah, exactly. It's what I meant. But compared to those other dynasties, how would you assess the Vilna Gaon's influence on, in terms of starting a movement that continues to the present day? Do you think we can? Yeah.
Today, I think that he had a very big influence on what the ultra-Orthodox religion community, which is today in Israel. It had begun in the beginning of the 19th century. And according to them, to their leaders, it was by the influence of the Gaon and the idea that they had come at all to Israel to create their community because they wanted to fulfill what he had saw, the vision of the future he had seen. Now, if you will ask their leaders today, not all of them or many of them will not agree with that at all. But according to the historians, that's what they actually thought 200 years ago when they had come to Earth. If you ask how today they are seeing the Gaon in this community, he is their model. He is the great man of their history. Everybody of them wants to be like him. He is very important to them. So today is a very important in the ultra-Orthodox community of Israel. But what I've spoken about, this vision of the future, that's something else. That's something if you can want secret, which only small groups think about, speaking about, work about.
Thank you.
I would also just add, in terms of Jewish learning, the Vilna Gaon, one of his main students was Reb Chaim of Volozhin, who founded the Volozhin Yeshiva, which is the model for all modern yeshivot. The modern yeshiva as we know it is basically an invention of Reb Chaim of Volozhin, who allegedly the Vilna Gaon told him to do this. No, I don't know if it really happened. So the modern yeshiva structure is also rooted in the Vilna Gaon's stuff.
Yes, I think that the Gaon is remembered as the person who actually created the world of learning of the Lithuanian Jews, which had made them the leaders of the whole Ashkenazi Jews. Even today, in the land of Israel, the Lithuanian Jews are actually the leader of all the ultra-Orthodox. So part of it is because of the influence of the Gaon. Till today, till 300 years after he was born, there are not many such other people.
We have another question from the VIP seat beside me. For those who know, Velvel Lutzet has a question.
I will just speak like just the voice of Gaon, comes from the behind. It's not just a big question. It's just there is an interesting story about Gaon prophesying, like if the Russian government will conquer the Crimea, then the Mashiach will come.
Yes.
You know this, and he means that this will be the Mashiach ben Yosef or Mashiach ben David, because I think it's also connected to like Gog and Magog. But the question is if Vilna Gaon was really the same, on the same side, like all these Kabbalistic ideas with Messianic ages and Gog and Magog. And now you see the Russian government took the Crimea. So maybe Vilna Gaon was right. Maybe Mashiach is coming now. Or this was the time of Russian-Turkish war, as I understand.
Thank you, Valentin, for bringing this very controversial point of discussion. Thank you.
I would like to say that the Vilna Gaon actually had a system how the future will do. He thinks that his pupils can influence the future with their own work. He said there is a system of what he called the hours, a sha'ot. The hours is the time, specific time in which there were supposed to be a very important event at this particular times. If you know when this particular time there's supposed to be a very specific and important event, then you can bring about a future which you wish and you want. That's part of his teaching, part of the Einstein movies. If you want, this is part of the future plan of the Gaon of Vilna. If it's actually in reality, I'm not one to say, but that's what he actually taught, he and his pupils.
Thank you for this very diplomatic answer. If there are other opinions or something, maybe a thought you want to share, something just popped up in your mind during this talk, please feel free to speak up and to share your thoughts. I see some faces smiling and walking through the lecture tonight, and yeah, so feel free. In the meantime, I just wanted maybe to stress this point that you are researching the connection between pop culture and the legacy of Gaon. So you just briefly mentioned that. Maybe you are free to share some maybe things you've researched and that popped out.
Okay, then I will talk about, I mentioned the story of the Golem. Probably all of the people here heard about the Golem of Prague, of the Maharal of Prague. This is actually a very late story from the middle of the 19th century. As far that we know, it did not exist, at least in writing, in print, before that time. We do know that the story had existed in Vilna at the beginning of the 19th century because the Gaon had spoke about it to his pupils. Jaime Volozhin had told in writing that the Gaon told him that once when he was a boy, he tried to create a golem. So because of that, and he actually was interested in the subject, he knows that and wrote about it. So there were stories in Vilna about the golem. There were stories, late stories, that the golem is still buried in the big synagogue of Vilna. Somewhere, you know, somewhere there, the synagogue which was destroyed by the 20th century. I think that that story of the Golem of Vilna somehow had come to Prague and become there famous. But the idea of the Golem very much interests the Gaon, maybe more than any of the Jewish rabbi that we know about, in actuality, not in legends like the Maharal of Prague.
Thank you very much. I got a question. Also, a question on the influence of the Gaon on non-Jewish population, or is his influence only on the Jewish community?
I don't think that the Gaon had much influence on the non-Jewish community. I don't know if they had heard about him at all. He was all the time at his study. I don't think that the non-Jewish population of the 19th century had heard about him much. They probably had seen his pictures at the Jews' house if they visited, but probably did not know who was that person. That was changed today. In the last 50 years, I think, as far that I know, the Lithuanians know more about the Gaon than they ever did. There are buildings in Vilna, the Museum of the Gaon in Vilna. There is a sculpture of the Gaon in Vilna, and there is mention of him in many Lithuanian journals and books. So today, the Lithuanians are aware about the Gaon. In the past, they didn't know about him much.
Thank you. We have another additional question from the VIP seats here. So, Valentin.
It's also interesting topic. I don't know if you already spoke about it, but I think not, about the medical studies of Gaon and about his, this was like his hobby, as I remember. Does he left some medical notes or some letters and some research in this area, or some like Rambam, some kind of advices for the people, for the health and all this stuff?
Yes, there are there are stories that the Gaon was very much interested in science and the medicines, probably interest him. There are such stories, we don't know how much they are true, but he was probably interested in a sense in the science of medicine, but it was not that important for him like Torah studies.
There is no documentation about it. It's just a rumors.
There are legends. There is no documentation. The Gaon actually translated a book of mathematics. That's true. So he was interested enough in mathematics to translate it to Hebrew, and it was actually the only book which he had published in his own life. All the books of his were published only after his death. But if he was interested enough in mathematics, he probably was interested in other things of science. But that's what we know.
Thank you very much. Other questions, remarks, something you want to share? Judith, can you unmute yourself? Yeah.
Okay. Hi. Thank you very much, both of you, to both of you for the amazing talk and the idea to talk about that, and for the organizing as well, Nastya and all working in the back. Because you mentioned, Eli, that you work on the connection of the Gra and popular culture.
Yes.
I would like to refer to the movie made by David Wallach, Chufshat Kaitz, My Father, My Lord, which is based on a Purush of the Gra, a very Perush Mesubach.
Could you explain what it means to those?
Very
complicated,
but yeah, it uses a lot of different sources and interconnects each source. It jumps from different commentaries of his own from the Torah and from the Talmud, and jumps back and forth. And I wanted to ask, what is your perception? What would you say about that movie? Did you like it? Didn't you like it? David Wallach is a Choser B'Tshuva, and from the Volozhin Yeshiva Bnei Brak, and I think he knows what the Gra wanted to say, and he's critical of what he says in his Perush.
Unfortunately, I don't know. What you told me is a news for me. I will look in this movie. At the moment, I cannot comment about it because I didn't watch it. Sorry, but I will watch now that you have told me about it.
Sorry.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Okay. Sorry.
I simply didn't know about that.
Thank you very much. Do you mind to share that in the chat? The name
of the director?
Yeah, the name of the
sure.
play and the director.
Sure.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? I received a kind of personal question to you, Eli. How is it to be a descendant of Gaon?
Yes, I'm the great grandson and depends where. In the secular communities of Israel, it doesn't count too much. In Bnei Brak, it's probably where the Haredis are dominant, it's probably amount to much more, but if you are secular like me, so it doesn't meaning much. If I was ultra Haredi, I probably could have found a good shidduch with that, but in the secular people, it do not mean much.
So I believe you did great by yourself without
Yes.
Shidchanit.
So how many?
We have another biographical question, but more about Gaon. How many children did Gaon have?
He has a daughter, I think. He had 3 sons. I'm the grandson of one of them. I'm not exactly remember, but I think he has something like 5 children, not including those who were died as babies, something like 5 children. I hope that we do not mistake, but something like 5 children.
Thank you very much. Last call for questions, comments, something you want to share. Yeah, thank you. Liana?
Okay, may I talk? Thanks very much for such interesting talks from different perspectives from Dvar Torah and all explanations about the amazing life and work of Gaon of Vilna. Just like also a very short, very short, not story, but also like from the works of Vilna Gaon, that he didn't just translate the mathematic works, but he was also very good in engineering stuff. And he not just translated the first astronomy books to Hebrew, but he was also doing drawings, like the satellites and the first rockets expressions was also drawn by Gaon of Vilna. So he was also very smart in astronomy and astrology as well.
I know that his grandson actually make pictures in his own books. His grandson, by the way, is Yaakov Moshe from a city in Belarusia today, which is synagogue is today is making for sale, no matter. He has published the books of his own with his own pictures of the third temple. He might actually was like his. Maybe the Gaon also makes such pictures, I don't know, but his grandson certainly did.
Yeah, and it's also very interesting because like the first drawing of a rocket, like, or a machine that could go to space was made by Vilna Gaon, and it's very, very close. Of course, not all the same, but the first drawings of the rockets by Tsiolkovsky. And it's really amazing how a person living in a not secular society could know such things. Yes.
Well, I would like very much to see them. I don't know about it, but I would like very much to see them.
I have, because I prepared also like a workshop, not on Vilnius Gaon, but something else. And I found these drawings, so I found them interesting. I can send them to Ella and she will forward them to others.
Certainly, I would be most happy to see them. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elena. And it's amazing that it's a kind of not only talk, but also an exchange of different opinions and learning from each other. This is beautiful. Also, mind the chat, Judith shared valuable information as well in the chat. And yeah, I would like to invite, if there are no more comments or any questions? If so, please say it now. If not, I'm looking through the chat right now. And if not, then I would like to ask our speakers for words of conclusion or just maybe some statements of their knowledge feeling right now and right here. I will ask Jeremy first to go and then Ellie. Thank you. Jeremy.
So I'll just say a quick word. One of the amazing things about the Vilna Gaon is that the Vilna Gaon did things that you can't do today in the Orthodox world. One of the big things that the Vilna Gaon did is in his Birei Hagra on the Shas, said, he used to say, sometimes he would be reading the Talmud and be like, this is a misprint. I know that this is a misprint. Actually, it should be this word. Which today, that's something that happens in the world of like talking academia and things like that, but is heretical in certain areas of the same ultra-Orthodox world that venerates the Vilna Gaon. So my message is, if you want to call into question things in Judaism, become the Vilna Gaon, and then everyone will listen to you.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Completely.
Very inspiring. Ellie, the stage is yours.
Okay, I think that the Vilna Gaon is very interesting person. He's a very interesting idealist. Well, I don't understand everything which he has to say. Part of it I do understand. Not if everything which he has to say I agree. Some of the things I think that they are very important. And I would like that many, many more people will know about them, because it is not just interesting, it is also very important. And I'm very happy that I have this discussion to speak about him.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to everybody who took the time to join tonight's session. Thank you very much to Ellie. Thank you very much to Jeremy. And lots of gratitude to Ella Nilova for organizing this amazing session. Thank you to all supporters and especially to J-ArtEck, Janusz Korczak Academy, and the Jewish Agency for Israel and the Ministry of Culture of Lithuania for making this session tonight possible. And we wish you, yeah?
I would like to thank you, Nastya, for the amazing moderation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me for that. And if you have any questions, you know how to find basically Ella, who sent you the invitations for tonight. And yeah, let's stay in touch and keep talking about Gaon, not only on his anniversary, but in general.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.